My family cut me off when I was unemployed. 5 years later, they came in and said, "You have no family. We'll be taking the house." Or said nothing at all, but called 911. Can you imagine having your own family, the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, betray you not once, but twice? I thought I knew what rock bottom felt like, but nothing prepared me for the moment my own parents and brother, after 5 years of silence, showed up on my doorstep, suitcases in hand, and flat out declared they were taking my house. My name is Sabrina, I'm 32 now, and looking back, I never thought my family would push me to such a breaking point. Growing up in suburban Pennsylvania, our family probably looked pretty normal from the outside. My dad, Richard, was a bank manager, always in crisp suits, briefcase practically glued to his hand. My mom, Diane, a nurse, working long shifts but somehow keeping our house absolutely spotless. And then there was my older brother, Brian, 3 years older, the undisputed golden child. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house, nothing fancy, just your average American family trying to make it work. But beneath that perfect picture, there were these complicated dynamics, these deep-seated issues that shaped my entire life. From the very beginning, it felt like there were different rulebooks for Brian and me. He was destined for greatness, you know? His mediocre grades? Celebrated. My excellent ones? Just expected. When he got into state university with a partial scholarship, my parents threw him a massive party and gifted him a brand new car. They emptied a huge chunk of their savings so he wouldn't have too much debt. Meanwhile, I was told from freshman year of high school that I'd need to work part-time to save for my own college. By 16, I was juggling school and 20 hours a week at the local diner, slinging pancakes and burgers, just trying to squirrel away every single penny. Even with straight A's and all my extracurriculars, talk of prestigious universities for me? Never happened. The message was crystal clear, even if never actually spoken. Brian was the investment. I was the afterthought. The one person who truly saw me, truly believed in me, was my grandma Margaret, my mother's mother. She lived about an hour away in this charming little cottage with a garden that, to me as a child, felt absolutely magical. Every summer, I'd spend 3 weeks with her while Brian was off at some sports camp my parents had paid for. Those weeks were my salvation. "Sabrina," she'd say, her hands weathered from decades of gardening, gently guiding mine in the soil. "Never let anyone tell you what your worth is. Only you decide that." And she'd always add, "And never depend on someone else to keep a roof over your head. Learn to build your own." Grandma Margaret had raised 3 kids mostly by herself after my grandfather passed away when my mom was only 12. She worked as a seamstress, managed to put all her children through at least some college. Her strength, her fierce independence, that became my North Star, especially when things at home felt suffocating. As college approached, the pressure from my parents intensified. My mom decided I should follow in her footsteps and become a nurse. "It's a stable profession, Sabrina. You'll always have work," she'd say, completely ignoring the fact I had zero interest in medicine. My dad agreed, adding, "Creative careers are for people who have family money to fall back on." What they didn't get was that I'd found my passion, graphic design. My art teacher, Miss Winters, had noticed my eye for composition, introduced me to digital design programs. I took to it immediately, staying late after school, entering local competitions. When I actually won a regional design award, my parents just dismissed it as a nice hobby, not a real career path. The tension finally boiled over my senior year, when college applications were due. I applied to the local community college with a strong design program, and a few affordable state schools. When the acceptance letters came in, my parents flat out refused to contribute to my education unless I switched my major to nursing or business. "We are not wasting money on an art degree," my father stated firmly at dinner. "If you want to throw away your future, you can pay for it yourself." I looked at my mother, desperate for support, but she just stared at her plate. Brian, home from college, smirked from across the table. "Maybe you should listen to Dad, Sabrina. Not everyone's cut out for a real career." That night, I cried myself to sleep. But the next morning, a decision solidified in me. I would attend community college, work full-time, and pursue my design degree no matter what. When I announced this at breakfast, my father simply shrugged. Your life, your mistake. I graduated high school with honors and moved into a tiny apartment with 2 roommates while attending community college. I worked nearly 40 hours a week between a coffee shop and a retail job, all while maintaining a 3.8 GPA in my design classes. I visited Grandma Margaret whenever I could, drawing strength from her unwavering belief in me. After 2 years, I transferred to a state university to finish my bachelor's. By then, I was barely speaking to my parents. Our interactions were limited to obligatory holiday visits where my father would ask pointed questions about my income potential, and my mother would slip me $20 bills like I was still a child, whispering, "In case you need to eat." Brian had graduated, secured a job at a financial firm, following in our dad's footsteps. Every family gathering became his showcase, a subtle way to highlight my perceived failure. "Brian just got a promotion," my mother would announce proudly. "And he's looking at buying a condo downtown." The unspoken comparison hung in the air like a heavy cloud. By the time I graduated with my bachelor's, I was 22, and hadn't lived at home for 4 years. I went to my graduation ceremony alone. My parents chose to attend a conference related to Brian's work instead. Grandma Margaret, now using a walker because of her arthritis, was the only family member in the audience. Her proud smile as I walked across that stage meant more than 1,000 absent relatives. With my degree finally in hand, I made the decision to move to Philadelphia. Better job opportunities. The design scene there was growing, and I'd secured an internship that could lead to full-time employment. The night before I left, I had dinner with Grandma Margaret. "I'm scared," I admitted, as we shared pie on her porch. "What if they're right and I fail?" She took my hand, her blue eyes sharp despite her 82 years. "Sabrina, the only true failure is living someone else's dream. You follow your heart. I'll always be here if you need a soft place to land." With those words echoing in my mind, I packed my car the next morning and drove toward my future, determined to prove I could succeed on my own terms, even if my family refused to believe in me. My first 2 years in Philly were challenging but so rewarding. I moved from intern to junior designer at a small marketing agency. The pay was modest, but I was building a portfolio, making connections. I shared a 2-bedroom apartment in a slightly shabby neighborhood with Jessica, a teacher I'd met through a roommate app. We became fast friends, turning our little place into a cozy home with thrift store finds and DIY projects. I called Grandma Margaret weekly, visited when I could. My contact with my parents dwindled to obligatory birthday calls and tense Thanksgiving visits. Brian had been promoted again, bought that downtown condo. My mother never failed to mention it. Then, 5 years ago, everything just fell apart. The recession hit our industry hard. My agency lost several major clients in 2 months. One Monday morning, we all arrived to find the doors locked, a notice of bankruptcy taped to the window. Just like that, I was unemployed. I immediately started freelancing, reaching out to old clients, applying for anything. But everyone was cutting budgets, and freelance designers were among the first expenses slashed. My savings, meager to begin with, vanished rapidly as I struggled to pay rent and buy groceries. Jessica helped where she could, covering utilities, sharing her teacher's lounge leftovers, but she wasn't exactly flush with cash herself. After 3 months of sparse work and mounting bills, I got an eviction warning. I'd paid partial rent for 2 months, but the landlord's patience was gone. Jessica was moving in with her boyfriend the next month, and I had no way to cover the full rent on my own. Panic set in. I was weeks away from homelessness. With nowhere else to turn, I swallowed my pride and called my parents. The phone rang 4 times before my mother answered with a distracted, "Hello? Mom, it's Sabrina," I said, my voice already trembling. "I need help." There was a pause. I heard her call out, "Richard, it's Sabrina." I explained my situation as calmly as I could, asking if I could borrow enough for 1 month's rent while I found steady work. I promised to pay them back with interest. The silence that followed stretched until it was suffocating. Finally, my father's voice came on the line. Cold. Distant. Sabrina, this is exactly what we warned you about. This unstable career path you chose has led you exactly where we predicted. Dad, please, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I just need a little help to get back on my feet. I have interviews lined up, but I need somewhere to live. We've been supporting Brian with his MBA tuition. My mother interjected. We simply don't have extra funds right now. I knew it was a lie. They always had money for Brian. What they meant was they didn't have money for me. You made your bed when you ignored our advice. My father continued. Perhaps this will teach you to make more practical decisions in the future. The call ended. No offer of help. Not even a place to stay temporarily. I sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes, sobbing until I couldn't breathe. That night, I called Grandma Margaret, but got no answer. Her neighbor called the next day and told me Grandma had been hospitalized with pneumonia. I wanted desperately to go to her, but I had no money for the trip, nor a place to leave my belongings. 2 weeks later, I was officially evicted. Jessica helped me load my most essential possessions into my 12-year-old Honda Civic. My design equipment, clothes, a few personal items, that's all I could fit. The rest went into a small storage unit I paid for with my last $100. With nowhere else to go, I drove to my parents' house. It was a rainy October evening when I parked in their driveway. Through the windows, I could see them, sitting in the living room, watching TV. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to gather courage, before finally approaching the door and ringing the bell. My father answered. Surprise quickly turning to disapproval, as he took in my disheveled appearance and the desperation in my eyes. Sabrina, what are you doing here? Dad, I lost my apartment. I just need a place to stay for a few weeks until I can find work and save for a new place. Please. He looked past me, at my car stuffed with belongings, and frowned. This is exactly what happens with these artistic careers. Instability. Richard, who is it? My mother appeared behind him, her expression hardening when she saw me. Our daughter seems to have found herself homeless, he replied, no attempt to hide his disdain. I'm not homeless, I said, my voice breaking. I just need family right now. My father crossed his arms. You chose your path, Sabrina. You chose to ignore our guidance. Now you need to take responsibility for those choices. We're hosting the neighborhood association meeting tomorrow, my mother added. This really isn't a good time. I stood there, rain soaking through my jacket, just staring at them. You've made it clear you don't need our input in your life decisions, my father said firmly. You cannot reject our advice and then expect our support when those decisions lead to hardship. With that, he closed the door. I stayed on their porch for several minutes, rain still pouring, before returning to my car. I sat in their driveway, watching their shadows move behind the curtains, waiting for them to change their minds, to come out. They never did. Eventually, I drove to a Walmart parking lot. I spent the night sleeping in my reclined driver's seat, $25 to my name, and nowhere to go. I called and texted Brian, hoping my brother might offer some help, but my messages went unanswered. For 2 weeks, I lived in my car, showering at a gym where I had a membership, using library computers to search for jobs and apartments. I kept calling my parents, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails that were never returned. One night, I drove past their house and saw Brian's car in the driveway. The entire family was together. Without me. It was the absolute lowest point of my life. I felt completely abandoned. No home. No family. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had shut me out when I needed them most. All because I had dared to follow my own path instead of the one they'd chosen for me. On a particularly cold November morning, I was sitting in a corner of a local coffee shop, nursing a single cup of tea I'd bought to justify using their free Wi-Fi. I'd been there for hours, searching for design gigs and affordable housing. Weeks of living in my car had taken their toll. My clothes were wrinkled from being stored in garbage bags, and despite my best efforts at the gym showers, I looked noticeably disheveled. I was so focused on my laptop that I didn't even notice someone approaching until they spoke. Sabrina? Sabrina Wilson? I looked up to see Eleanor Garcia, a former colleague from the marketing agency. She was dressed in a smart pea coat, holding a to-go coffee cup, looking exactly like the successful professional I had failed to become. Eleanor! Hi, I said, immediately self-conscious about my appearance. I thought that was you. I've been trying to reach you. The company email addresses all died when the agency closed. She slid into the chair across from me, either not noticing or politely ignoring my unkempt state. How have you been? Are you working somewhere new? I considered lying, trying to maintain some facade of success, but I was too exhausted for pretense. Not exactly, I admitted. I've been freelancing, but it's been really slow. Actually, I'm kind of between places right now. Eleanor's expression shifted from casual friendliness to genuine concern. Between places? As in housing? I nodded, fighting back tears of embarrassment. It's been a rough few months. Eleanor leaned forward, lowering her voice. Sabrina, are you living in your car? The direct question shattered my remaining composure. I nodded again, unable to speak as tears spilled down my cheeks. Eleanor immediately moved her chair closer and put a hand on my arm. Why didn't you reach out to any of us? The whole team has been checking in with each other since the closure. I didn't want anyone to know how badly I was failing, I admitted. Everyone else seemed to land on their feet. Eleanor shook her head. Trust me, everyone struggled. I was unemployed for 6 weeks before I found something. She paused, studying my face. When was the last time you ate a proper meal? The question made me realize I couldn't remember. I'd been surviving on granola bars and fast food dollar menu items when I could afford them. Come on, Eleanor said, standing up. Pack your stuff. You're coming with me. Before I could protest, she helped me gather my laptop and bag. She led me to her car, insisting I leave mine in the coffee shop parking lot temporarily. 30 minutes later, we were sitting in her warm apartment, while she made sandwiches and soup. After I'd eaten, she showed me to her spare bedroom. It's not much, but it has a real bed, and it's yours for as long as you need it, she said, putting fresh towels on the dresser. I was completely overwhelmed by her kindness. I can't accept this, Eleanor. We were just coworkers. We were a team, she corrected me. And now we're friends. That's what friends do. She sat on the edge of the bed. Besides, I might have a job opportunity for you. Eleanor explained that her boyfriend, Michael, ran a small design studio focusing on web development. They needed someone to assist with graphic elements and user interface design. The pay was modest, but it was steady work. I can't promise anything, she cautioned. But I'll talk to him tonight. In the meantime, take a shower, get some real sleep, and we'll figure this out together. The next morning, I went with Eleanor to meet Michael. His studio was small but growing, and after reviewing my portfolio, he offered me a position on the spot. It was entry-level, a step back from where I'd been, but it was work. A regular paycheck. I accepted immediately. That afternoon, Eleanor helped me retrieve my car and the few possessions I'd been living with. As we were organizing the spare room, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Is this Sabrina Wilson? An unfamiliar voice asked when I answered. Yes, this is she. This is Nancy Holden, your grandmother's neighbor. I've been trying to reach you. Your grandmother's condition has worsened. The doctors are not optimistic. My heart sank. In the chaos of my own crisis, I hadn't been able to check on Grandma Margaret as frequently. I'd left messages at her neighbor's number, but we'd missed each other's calls. She's been asking for you, Nancy continued. I think you should come if you can. I explained the situation to Eleanor, who immediately offered to drive me the 3 hours to my grandmother's town. We'll go right now, she insisted. Just let me call Michael to reschedule tomorrow's meeting. We arrived at the hospital just after 9 that evening. Grandma Margaret looked so small in the hospital bed, connected to oxygen and monitors. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, though, and she reached out a frail hand. "My Sabrina," she whispered. "I knew you would come." I sat with her through the night, holding her hand and telling her about my new job opportunity. I didn't burden her with the details of my homelessness or my parents' rejection. She was too weak for such upsetting news. Instead, I focused on the positive turn my situation had taken, thanks to Eleanor. "Always told you," she murmured. "You make your own way." In the early morning hours, she asked me to retrieve a small box from her purse that Nancy had brought to the hospital. Inside was a key and a folded document. "My will," she explained softly. "House is yours. Always meant for you." I tried to object, to tell her she would recover and return home, but she shook her head. "Listen now," she said, her voice surprisingly firm despite her weakness. "You have the spirit, the strength. Brian has your parents. You need roots." 2 days later, Grandma Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep, her hand in mine. Through my grief, I had to navigate the practical matters of her passing. The hospital contacted my parents, who arrived for the funeral arrangements, looking appropriately somber but largely uninvolved in the details. During the reading of the will, their demeanor changed dramatically. Grandma Margaret had indeed left her cottage and savings to me, with only small mementos going to my mother and Brian. My father's face darkened with anger, and my mother burst into tears. "Mother always favored you," she accused me. I didn't respond. Instead, I let the lawyer collect the keys to my grandmother's house and began the process of moving into my unexpected inheritance. The cottage needed work. It had been well maintained, but reflected my grandmother's 85 years in its decor and appliances. Still, it was mine. A home no one could take from me. Eleanor helped me move in, bringing necessities from her apartment, and spending a weekend helping me clean. "It has good bones," she declared as we scrubbed the kitchen. "An amazing natural light for a home office." For the first time in months, I fell asleep feeling safe, with a sense of possibility. In my grandmother's garden, now overgrown but still beautiful, I could almost hear her voice. "You build your own shelter, Sabrina. You always could." With a roof securely over my head and a steady job I could do remotely, I began the process of rebuilding my life. I transformed the small front room of the cottage into a home office, investing in a new desk and the design equipment I needed. Michael was pleased with my work and gradually increased my responsibilities and pay. The cottage itself became my passion project. I tackled one room at a time, maintaining the character Grandma Margaret had loved. The garden, which had been her pride and joy, became my weekend therapy. I knew nothing about plants when I started, but I bought books, watched videos, and slowly brought the overgrown beds back to life. Living in a small town after years in the city required adjustment. At first, I kept to myself, still raw from my family's rejection and wary of forming new connections. But small towns have a way of drawing you in, whether you want them to or not. It started with Mrs. Jenkins next door, who brought over a casserole to welcome the new neighbor, despite having known me as Margaret's granddaughter for years. Then came Tom from the hardware store, who began setting aside vintage doorknobs he thought would match the cottage's character. Soon, I found myself exchanging waves and small talk with people on my way to the post office or grocery store. 6 months after moving in, I had my first real friend in town. I'd been frequenting the small local bookstore, partly for design inspiration, partly for the excellent coffee they served in their attached cafe. The owner, Patrick Lewis, was about my age and had inherited the store from his uncle just a year before I moved to town. "You're going to wear that design book out," he commented one day as I purchased yet another coffee while browsing the same interior design volume. "Why not just buy it already?" "Budget constraints," I admitted with a smile. "I'm renovating bit by bit." The next day when I came in, the book was wrapped in brown paper. Behind the counter with a note. "Renovation consultant fee. Your coffee wisdom has improved our menu. Patrick. We became friends through books and coffee, sharing recommendations, and eventually meals. Patrick was easy to talk to, with none of the judgment I'd grown accustomed to from my family. When I finally told him the full story of how I'd ended up in town, he listened without interruption. Your parents sound like real pieces of work, was his only comment when I finished. Their loss. As my design skills and client list grew, I decided to take a risk. Using my savings, I launched my own small design studio, Elevation Designs, focusing on branding for small businesses. My experience at Michael's company had shown me that many local businesses struggled with their visual identity, but couldn't afford large agency fees. I started with a website and business cards, then began approaching local shops and restaurants. My first client? Patrick, who needed a new logo and signage for the bookstore. From there, word spread. Within a year, I had enough regular clients to leave my position with Michael, though we maintained a collaborative relationship, referring clients to each other. As my business grew, so did my investment in the cottage. I replaced the aging roof, updated the ancient heating system, and renovated the kitchen with modern appliances while keeping the charming cabinets Grandma Margaret had loved. The property value increased substantially with each improvement, but that was secondary to creating a home that honored her while reflecting my own style. The garden flourished under my increasingly knowledgeable care. I added a small patio where I could work outdoors on pleasant days, and a fire pit for evening relaxation. Patrick often joined me there, bringing books he thought I'd enjoy and listening to my ideas for new projects. By the 5-year anniversary of Grandma Margaret's passing, my life had transformed completely. Elevation Designs had 3 employees besides myself, operating from a converted garage on my property. I had established myself in the community, joining the Small Business Association and even helping organize the annual arts festival. My relationship with Patrick had deepened into something more than friendship, though we were taking things slowly, both valuing our independence. My circle of friends included Eleanor and Michael, who visited regularly, and a growing network of local connections. I hadn't spoken to my parents or Brian since the funeral. Occasionally, I'd receive a Christmas card with no personal message, just their printed names. I sent similar impersonal cards in return, unwilling to sever the last thread completely, but protecting myself from further hurt. The cottage, once my grandmother's haven, had become my own sanctuary and success story. The girl who had once slept in her car now owned a debt-free home, ran a profitable business, and had created a life filled with meaningful connections. I had done exactly what Grandma Margaret believed I could do. Built my own shelter, both physically and emotionally. What I didn't realize was that my hard-won peace was about to be shattered by the very people who had once turned me away. The first sign came in the form of an email from Brian on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Seeing his name in my inbox after 5 years of silence made my coffee taste suddenly bitter. The subject line read, "Touching base, dear Sabrina." The message began with artificial warmth. "It's been too long since we've been in touch. I recently came across your design company website and was impressed by what you've accomplished. Mom and Dad mentioned they haven't heard from you in years and are concerned. I hope all is well. Let's catch up soon, Brian." I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the brief message. There was no acknowledgement of his silence when I needed help. No mention of their rejection when I was homeless. Just a casual, touching base, as if we'd simply lost track of each other's lives through mutual neglect. I showed the email to Patrick during our lunch date that day. "Sounds like someone wants something," he commented, handing my phone back. "People don't usually reach out after 5 years of silence just to say hello." I nodded, the same suspicion having formed in my mind. "The timing is strange too. Why now? Are you going to respond?" he asked. I considered. "Not yet. I want to see if there's more to this sudden interest." I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, my phone rang with my parents' number. After 5 years of silence, the sight of it was so startling that I answered without thinking. "Sabrina, darling!" My mother's voice, artificially bright. It's so good to finally hear your voice. Mom, I replied neutrally. This is unexpected. Well, we've been thinking about you so much lately. Brian mentioned he reached out and hadn't heard back. We were worried. I've been busy, I said. Running my business takes a lot of time. Yes, we saw your website. Very impressive, honey. Your father and I were just saying how proud we are of what you've accomplished. The praise felt hollow after years of criticism and abandonment. My mother continued before I could respond. Anyway, we feel terrible about the misunderstandings in the past. Family is so important, and we would love to reconnect. Perhaps we could come visit you soon? Misunderstandings? I repeated, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Is that what you call turning away your daughter when she was homeless? There was a pause before my mother spoke again, her voice lower. We all made mistakes, Sabrina. We were going through a difficult time ourselves, but that's in the past. We should focus on rebuilding our relationship now. Something in her tone struck me as rehearsed, as if she had practiced this conversation. I agreed to think about a visit without committing to dates, then ended the call as quickly as possible. That evening, I received another call, this time from Brian. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hey sis, he said with forced cheer. Mom said you two spoke. It's great that we're all reconnecting. What's going on, Brian? I asked directly. Why the sudden family reunion interest after 5 years? He laughed, the sound slightly strained. Can't a brother want to reconnect with his sister? But since you asked, things have been challenging lately. Over the next 20 minutes, Brian revealed the family situation. He had made several poor investment decisions, losing most of his savings and accumulating significant debt. My father had been forced into early retirement from the bank after an internal investigation found irregularities in his management practices. While he avoided criminal charges, his reputation was ruined. My mother had developed back problems that prevented her from working full shifts at the hospital. We've had to downsize significantly, Brian explained. The condo was foreclosed, and Mom and Dad had to sell the house. They're in a small apartment now. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, genuinely meaning it despite everything. That must be difficult. Yeah, well, family has to stick together in tough times, right? The irony of his statement seemed lost on him. Anyway, we were thinking we could come visit next weekend. Get to know your town, see Grandma's old place, reconnect. I reluctantly agreed to a Saturday lunch, setting clear boundaries that it would be a brief visit, not an overnight stay. After hanging up, I called Patrick. They're coming Saturday, I told him. And from what Brian said, they're in financial trouble. Want me to be there? Patrick offered, always the rock. I accepted gratefully, already feeling anxious about the impending reunion. That Saturday, my family arrived, their presence diminished by circumstances. My mother embraced me with teary eyes while Brian hung back, surveying the cottage with undisguised interest. You've done wonders with the place, my mother commented as I gave them a brief tour. It's so much nicer than when your grandmother lived here. Grandmother kept it perfectly nice, I replied coolly. I've just updated some things while maintaining her style. Must have cost a fortune, my father remarked, peering at the new kitchen appliances. Seems like your little design business is doing well. Elevation Designs is doing very well, Patrick interjected smoothly. Sabrina has clients across 3 states now. My father's eyes narrowed slightly at Patrick's presence, clearly not expecting me to have backup. And you are? Patrick Lewis. I own the bookstore in town and have known Sabrina since she moved here. Lunch was a tense affair, with my parents and Brian alternating between complimenting the house and subtly highlighting their current difficulties. My mother mentioned their cramped apartment 3 times. Brian talked about the job market being impossible, despite his qualifications. As they were preparing to leave, Brian asked to use the bathroom. He was gone for an unusually long time. And when he returned, I noticed his phone in his hand. Getting good reception here, he commented casually. The cottage has really solid bones. Good investment property. After they left, Patrick helped me clean up. "Well, that was uncomfortable," he said, loading the dishwasher. "Did you notice your brother taking pictures of every room?" I nodded, a sick feeling in my stomach. And my father asking about property values in the area. And my mother commenting on how much space there is for just one person. "They're planning something," Patrick said, stating what we both knew. "Be careful, Sabrina." The following week brought daily calls from my family. My mother wanted recipes I'd served at lunch. My father had questions about the heating system. Brian wondered if I had the original deed from Grandma Margaret. Each conversation felt like a probe, testing for vulnerabilities. The truth became clear during their second visit 2 weeks later. As we sat in the garden, my father broached the subject directly. "Sabrina, your mother and I have been thinking. This house has 3 bedrooms, and you're just one person. We're struggling in that tiny apartment. It would make sense for us to move in here. A family home should house a family." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. "This is my home," I finally said. "I inherited it from grandmother." "Yes, but surely she intended it to benefit the whole family," my mother interjected. "She wouldn't have wanted us struggling while you have all this space. Actually, she specifically left it to me because she knew I would care for it properly," I responded, anger rising. "And because she knew I was the only one who truly appreciated it." "Well, regardless of her intentions," my father said dismissively, "we are family. We should support each other. Brian could take the room above the garage, and your mother and I would take the master bedroom." "That is my office," I said, incredulous. "Where I run my business. You could move your little computer to the dining room," my mother suggested, as if solving a simple problem. "It would be a much more efficient use of the space." "This is not happening," I stated firmly. "I am sorry for your situation, but you cannot move in here." The conversation deteriorated from there, with my father becoming increasingly insistent and my mother alternating between guilt trips and passive-aggressive comments. Brian remained suspiciously quiet, typing on his phone throughout the argument. After they left, I immediately called my lawyer, the same one who had handled Grandma Margaret's will. I explained the situation and asked him to review all documentation related to my ownership of the property. "Everything is in order," he assured me. "The house is solely in your name. They have no legal claim to it whatsoever." Despite this reassurance, I followed Patrick's suggestion and installed security cameras covering the entrances to the house and property. Something told me this confrontation was far from over. 3 weeks after that uncomfortable visit, I needed to attend a design conference in Boston. It was an important opportunity to connect with potential clients and learn about industry developments. Patrick offered to check on the house while I was gone, but he had the bookstore to run and could only drive by occasionally. The conference lasted 3 days. On the second evening, as I was networking at a reception, I received a text from my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. "Thought you were away until tomorrow. Saw lights on in your house and people moving around inside. Everything okay?" My heart raced as I called her immediately. "Mrs. Jenkins, I'm still in Boston. There shouldn't be anyone in my house." "Oh dear," she replied, concern evident in her voice. "Should I call the police?" "No, let me check my security cameras first," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'll call you right back." I opened the security app on my phone with trembling fingers. The footage showed my father's car in the driveway and 3 figures unloading boxes and suitcases. I watched in disbelief as my father used something to force the back door lock, then let my mother and Brian inside. I immediately called Patrick, who was closing the bookstore. "They're breaking into my house," I told him, my voice shaking. "They're moving in while I'm gone." "I'll drive over right now," he promised. "Should I call the police?" "Not yet," I said, still processing the betrayal. "Let me try calling them first." I called my father's cell phone, watching on the camera as he checked the screen, then declined the call. I tried my mother and Brian with the same result. Finally, I called the landline I had installed in the cottage. After several rings, Brian answered. "Hello, Wilson Residence," he said casually, as if he belonged there. "Brian, what the hell are you doing in my house?" I demanded. There was a pause, then a sigh. "Sabrina, we were going to call you tomorrow. We're just getting settled in." "Getting settled in? You broke into my house. You're trespassing." "Don't be dramatic," he replied coolly. "This is a family home. We are family. Besides, it's not like you need all this space just for yourself." I heard my father in the background, and Brian partially covered the phone. I could still make out my father saying, "Tell her we'll discuss it when she returns. The decision has been made. You need to leave right now," I stated, struggling to control my anger. "I am calling the police if you are not out of my house in 30 minutes. Brian's voice hardened. "That would be a mistake, Sabrina. We have nowhere else to go. And calling the police on your own family would be cruel. Besides, Mom and Dad are the ones with the real family connection to this house, not you. It's my house, Brian. Grandmother left it to me." "A technicality," he dismissed. "Anyway, we've already spoken to a lawyer about challenging the will. Grandma was old and not entirely competent when she made those arrangements. We have a good case for overturning it." The threat sent a chill through me. While I knew they had no legal ground to stand on, the idea of a court battle was daunting. I ended the call and immediately booked a flight home for the next morning, missing the final day of the conference. Patrick met me at the airport, his face grim. "They're still there," he reported. "I went by this morning. Your father answered the door and told me it was a family matter and to mind my own business." "Did you call the police?" I asked as we drove toward the cottage. "I thought that should be your decision," he replied. "But I did speak to your lawyer. He said their claims about challenging the will are nonsense. Your grandmother had regular cognitive assessments as part of her medical care, and she was fully competent when she updated her will. When we arrived at the cottage, I was shocked to see my family had already made visible changes. My mother's decorative pillows adorned the porch swing. My father's golf clubs stood by the front door. They had quite literally moved in, assuming ownership in my absence. I took a deep breath and entered my own home, using my key. The scene inside was worse than I had imagined. My carefully arranged living room had been rearranged. Boxes of my parents' belongings sat stacked in corners. Family photos I had removed years ago had been placed on the mantel, replacing my own pictures. My mother emerged from the kitchen, startled to see me. "Sabrina, we were not expecting you until tomorrow." "Clearly," I replied coldly. "Where's Dad?" "In the master bedroom, organizing his clothes." The casual way she referred to my bedroom sent anger coursing through me. I found my father hanging his suits in my closet, my own clothes pushed to one side. Brian was in the room above the garage, my office, where he had moved my design equipment to one corner to make space for his bed. I gathered them in the living room, Patrick standing supportively behind me. "You all need to leave," I stated firmly. "Now, Sabrina, be reasonable," my father began in his authoritative tone. "This arrangement makes sense for everyone. You have this big house all to yourself while we've been struggling. A situation of your own making," I pointed out, "and completely irrelevant to my home ownership. You don't even have a real family," my mother said with surprising venom. "No husband, no children, just you and your little business. We need this house more than you do. That's not how property ownership works," Patrick interjected. My father turned to him with a glare. "This doesn't concern you. This is between family." "Patrick is more family to me than any of you have been," I replied. "He didn't abandon me when I was homeless and desperate." Ancient history. Brian waved dismissively. "We're here now, ready to be a family again. After you've depleted your resources and need something from me," I said. "This is not about family. This is about you wanting my house. We will take this house," my father stated flatly, dropping all pretense. "One way or another. We've already spoken to a lawyer about our options. Your non-existent options. I corrected. The house is legally mine. For now, he said with disturbing confidence. But we have documented evidence of your grandmother's declining mental state. And as her direct descendants, we have a strong case for rightful inheritance. I knew he was bluffing, but the confrontation had gone far enough. Without another word, I took out my phone and dialed 911. What are you doing? My mother demanded, her eyes widening. Calling the police to report trespassers in my home. I replied calmly. We are not trespassers. We are your family, she shrieked. Family doesn't break into each other's homes, I said as the dispatcher answered. I reported the situation, providing my address and explaining that people had entered my home without permission and were refusing to leave. My father lunged for the phone, but Patrick stepped between us. Don't make this worse, he warned my father. The 15 minutes it took for the police to arrive were tense and silent. When 2 officers knocked on the door, I answered and explained the situation, showing them my identification with the cottage's address and the deed to the property. These people entered my home without permission while I was out of town, I explained. They damaged my back door lock. My father attempted to argue that it was a family disagreement and not a police matter. But the officers were clear. Sir, if you do not have legal residence here, and the homeowner wants you to leave, you need to leave. The older officer stated firmly. Otherwise, you will be arrested for trespassing. This is ridiculous. She's my daughter, my father protested. That does not give you the right to enter her property without permission, the officer replied. You have 30 minutes to collect your immediate belongings. Anything else can be arranged for pickup at a later date. As they gathered their things under police supervision, my mother approached me, tears in her eyes. How could you do this to your own parents? I met her gaze steadily. The same way you could turn away your daughter when she had nowhere else to go. The security footage of their break-in was provided to the police, who advised me on obtaining a restraining order. My lawyer filed the paperwork the next day, and within a week, a temporary order was granted, preventing my family from approaching my property. As I watched the police escort my family from my home, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was pain at the depth of their betrayal, anger at their entitlement, but primarily a sense of righteous validation. For the first time, I had stood my ground against their manipulation and emotional abuse. That night, after securing the house with new locks, I sat with Patrick on the porch swing my grandmother had loved. You did the right thing, he assured me, his arm around my shoulders. I know, I replied, watching the stars emerge in the evening sky. It just shouldn't have had to come to this. The legal aftermath of my family's attempted takeover lasted several months. The temporary restraining order became permanent when evidence of their premeditated plan emerged. Text messages recovered from Brian's phone revealed their scheme to move in during my absence and claim emotional duress if I tried to evict them. Their bluff about challenging the will was exposed as completely baseless when my lawyer presented Grandma Margaret's medical records, confirming her sound mental state. My father and Brian faced minor criminal charges for the breaking and entering, receiving probation and community service. Throughout the proceedings, they maintained that they had done nothing wrong, that family property should be shared. My mother, however, began to show signs of regret as the consequences of their actions became clear. 3 weeks after the court hearing, I received a handwritten letter from her. Unlike the defensive, entitled tone they had all taken previously, her words seemed genuinely remorseful. I do not expect forgiveness, she wrote, but I need you to know that I see now how terribly we failed you. Not just in these recent events, but throughout your life. Your father and Brian are still angry, but I cannot continue pretending what we did was justified. When you needed us most, we turned you away. There is no excuse for that. The letter stirred complicated feelings. Part of me wanted to believe in her remorse, while another part remained wary of further manipulation. After careful consideration, I wrote back a brief, civil response, acknowledging her apology without offering immediate reconciliation. Trust, once broken so thoroughly, could not be quickly rebuilt. The experience left emotional scars that required professional help to address. I began seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma and joined a support group for people with toxic family relationships. The shared stories of others who had experienced similar betrayals helped me understand that my situation was not unique, and that setting boundaries was not just acceptable but necessary for healing. Family is not defined by blood. My therapist often reminded me. It is defined by consistent love, respect, and support. This truth resonated deeply as I reflected on who had actually provided those things in my life. Patrick, whose steadfast presence had become a cornerstone of my happiness. Eleanor, who had extended a lifeline when I was at my lowest point. The community of neighbors and fellow small business owners who had welcomed me without judgment. My relationship with Patrick deepened through these challenging months. His unwavering support during the family crisis had shown me what genuine partnership looked like. On the first anniversary of the break-in incident, he proposed in Grandma Margaret's garden, now flourishing with the perennials I had planted in her memory. "You deserve a family who sees your worth," he said as he offered a simple, elegant ring. "I would be honored to start that family with you." 6 months later, we married in a small ceremony in that same garden. Eleanor was my maid of honor, and Michael stood with Patrick. My parents and Brian were not invited, a boundary that protected the joy of the day. Instead, I was surrounded by the family I had chosen, people who had proved their love through actions rather than mere biological connection. As life settled into a new normal, I found myself contemplating ways to transform my painful experiences into something meaningful. The cottage, once a source of conflict, became a sanctuary, not just for me, but for others in need. I established a small foundation in Grandma Margaret's name, providing temporary housing and career mentorship for young adults facing homelessness due to family rejection. Everyone deserves a safe place to land, I explained to the local paper when they covered the foundation's launch. And everyone deserves the chance to build their own success story. The first recipient was Jamie, a 22-year-old graphic design student whose parents had cut her off when she changed majors from business to art. The parallels to my own story were striking. I offered her the apartment above the garage, now converted into proper living space, and an internship at Elevation Designs. Watching her confidence grow reminded me of my own journey. 5 years after being abandoned by my biological family, I had created something far stronger than the ties that had failed me. I had built a home, a business, a marriage, and a purpose that honored Grandma Margaret's belief in me while extending that same support to others. I occasionally received updates about my parents and Brian through mutual acquaintances. My father never acknowledged his wrongdoing, maintaining that I had been selfish and unforgiving. Brian had moved to another state, starting over after his financial missteps. My mother had separated from my father and was attempting to rebuild her life independently, a development that suggested she at least had learned something from our family's implosion. The door to reconciliation remained theoretically open, but with conditions that honored my self-worth. Any relationship would need to be built on genuine respect, not convenience or need. Until then, I focused on nurturing the healthy connections that had proved their value. On quiet evenings, sitting in Grandma Margaret's garden with Patrick, I often reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From homelessness to homeowner, from abandoned daughter to community supporter, I had discovered that family was not a birthright, but a privilege earned through love and respect. I had to learn that having no family is better than having one that hurts you, and that creating your own family of choice is not just possible, but often more fulfilling than maintaining toxic blood ties. The cottage that my grandmother left me had become more than just a house. It was physical proof that I deserved to take up space in the world, that my dreams and boundaries mattered. By defending it against those who would take it from me, I had finally defended my own worth. Have you ever had to create boundaries with family members who tried to take advantage of you? Or have you built a chosen family that supported you when your biological one failed? Tell me what you think. I really want to know. Thank you for listening. Take care. Good luck.